You have been living inside a case of mistaken identity, not a small one, not a minor misunderstanding about a detail or two, a complete, foundational, life-shaping case of mistaken identity that has been operating at the core of how you understand yourself for so long that it no longer even feels like a misunderstanding. It just feels like the truth, like the simple, settled reality of who you are. A person with this history, a person with these limitations, a person who has been through these things and carries these wounds and has these doubts and struggles with these fears. A person who is, at the end of the day, ordinary. That is the identity you have been living from. And it is wrong, not partially wrong, not wrong in a few of the details while mostly accurate in the big picture. Wrong at the foundation. Wrong in the way that a wrong foundation makes everything built on top of it wrong, regardless of how well constructed the upper levels appear. The ordinary person you have understood yourself to be is not who you are. It was never who you were. It is a case of mistaken identity, so thorough and so long-running that it would take something extraordinary to break it open. Today is that extraordinary thing. Because what you are about to discover about yourself, about who you truly are in the spirit world, about who you have returned as in this generation, is going to rearrange something inside you that has needed to be rearranged for a very long time. It is going to give you a framework for your own life that makes sense of things that have never made sense before. The unexplained intensity of your spiritual awareness, the inexplicable depth of your sensitivity, the persistent sense that you were made for something that you have not yet fully accessed. The feeling of recognizing things you have never been taught. The knowing that goes deeper than experience can account for. The way certain spiritual realities feel less like new information and more like things you are remembering. All of that is about to make sense. But first, you have to be willing to let go of the small identity, the ordinary self-understanding, the managed, cautious, disappointment-protected version of who you have allowed yourself to be in order to survive the gap between who you feel you are and what your life has shown you so far. You have to be willing to hear something about yourself that is bigger than what fear will easily accept. Something that will require a level of self-permission you may not have given yourself before. Permission to actually be who heaven says you are, rather than who the accumulated weight of your human experience has convinced you that you are. Are you willing? Because what comes next requires that willingness. It is the price of admission to the truth you are about to receive. Before we go any further, heaven wants to ask you something, and it is not a rhetorical question. It is a genuine inquiry that is meant to land in you and be considered rather than skimmed past in the momentum of reading. Have you ever felt like you have been here before? Not in a theoretical sense, in a felt sense, a sense that certain experiences carry a quality of recognition rather than discovery. A sense that certain kinds of knowing arrived in you without the normal process of learning. A sense that your soul has a depth of weariness that does not entirely match the length of your current life. A sense that the longing you carry is not just about this lifetime, but about something older, something longer, something that stretches back further than your birth year. Have you ever looked at the suffering of the world and felt a grief that was too old and too deep to have been generated entirely by your own personal experience of loss? Have you ever encountered a truth about God or about the spiritual dimension of life and felt not that you were learning it for the first time, but that you were being reminded of it? Have you ever sat with a person in their deepest pain and known with a certainty that had no logical source exactly what they needed to hear? Have you ever found yourself operating in levels of spiritual awareness that your background and your training and your education could not fully account for? If any of that resonates, it is not imagination. It is memory. The soul you are carrying in this body has been somewhere before, has known things before, has walked in levels of divine intimacy and spiritual authority and closeness to heaven that the ordinary new soul has not yet developed. And the things that feel like recognition, the things that feel like remembering rather than learning, the things that arrive in you with a quality of return rather than arrival, those things are exactly what they feel like. You are not starting from nothing in the spirit world. You are returning. And the question of who you have returned as is what heaven wants to address today. Heaven wants to speak about what it means to be a returning soul. Not in the way that certain human philosophies have framed this concept. In the way that heaven actually understands it. Because the truth of what you are is more specific and more beautiful and more purposeful than any human philosophical framework has been able to fully capture. There are souls that heaven sends back, not as a punishment, not as a consequence, but as a specific deployment. A strategic sending of a soul that has already been deepened and seasoned and developed through previous experience of divine proximity and has been sent back to this earth at a specific time because what this specific time requires is exactly what that soul carries. You are one of those souls. The depth you carry did not accumulate in this lifetime alone. The spiritual sensitivity that sometimes overwhelms you, that picks up things other people do not notice, that feels things before they become visible, that knows things that experience has not taught. That depth was not built from scratch in the years you have been alive. It was brought. It arrived with you. It was packed into the soul that entered your body at your birth as equipment for the assignment that heaven was deploying you to fulfill. The wisdom that sometimes comes out of you and surprises even you. The knowing that arrives without an obvious source. The way you can sometimes see straight to the heart of a spiritual matter that people with far more formal training are still circling around. The way God's presence is not an occasional experience for you, but something you have always known how to access, even when you did not have the theological language for what you were doing. None of that developed in just this lifetime. None of that is explained by only the years you have been alive. It is the accumulated depth of a soul that has been close to heaven before, that has walked in divine proximity before, that has carried spiritual assignments before and fulfilled them and grown through them and been sent back as something richer and deeper and more equipped than it was when it first began. That is what you are. And that is why the ordinary identity never fit. Because it was trying to contain something that ordinary containers were never designed to hold. Michael wants to speak about the specific level of spiritual identity you carry, not in vague generalities, but with the directness that this moment requires, because the soul reading these words is not a beginner in the spirit world, regardless of how their current life circumstances might suggest otherwise. And understanding the level you actually carry changes everything about how you approach your calling, your authority, your relationship with God, and your understanding of why your life has unfolded the way it has. You carry the identity of an intercessor in the deepest sense of that word. Not an intercessor in only the narrow sense of someone who prays for others, though that is part of it. An intercessor in the ancient, comprehensive, foundational sense. A soul that stands between, that occupies the space between heaven and the needs of earth and bears the weight of that space. That feels the pain of the world, not just as an observer, but as a carrier. That takes the grief and the darkness and the need of human existence into the place of divine presence and holds it there until heaven moves. That is why you feel so much. That is why other people's pain lands in you the way it does. That is why you cannot be in a room without sensing the emotional and spiritual atmosphere of the room. That is why you absorb things that others walk past without registering. That is why you have sometimes felt overwhelmed by the weight of what you carry, without fully understanding where the weight was coming from. You were made to carry it, not as a curse, as a calling. The intercessory soul feels deeply because it was designed to. Because feeling deeply is not a liability to the assignment. It is the very mechanism through which the assignment operates. You cannot stand between heaven and the needs of earth without the sensitivity to actually feel both sides of that space. You cannot carry the weight of intercession without the capacity to be genuinely affected by what you are carrying. Your sensitivity is not a flaw to be managed. It is a gift to be stewarded. You also carry the identity of a boundary breaker, a soul sent specifically to go where the gospel of God's love has not yet reached in its fullness, not necessarily geographically, but into the spaces that organized religion has sometimes failed to reach, into the broken places, into the complicated places, into the places where people have decided that God is either not real or not for them, into the spaces of doubt and deconstruction and profound human mess where the cleaned-up version of spiritual truth does not land, but where the raw, honest, lived from experience version lands like water on parched ground. You were sent to those spaces. Your brokenness qualified you for them. Your questions made you credible in them. Your refusal to pretend that faith is easy made you trustworthy to the people in them. The parts of your story that you have sometimes been most embarrassed by are the exact parts that give you access to the people and the places you were sent to reach. And you carry the identity of a restorer, a soul sent specifically to take what has been broken or lost or damaged or stolen and bring it back. To restore relationships, to restore hope, to restore faith in people who lost it, to restore the sense of divine calling in people who buried it, to restore joy in people who forgot what it felt like, to restore dignity to people who had it stripped away, to restore the knowledge of being loved and valued and chosen to people who were told they were none of those things. That restoration anointing is real and it is active in you. And every experience of your own restoration, every time you yourself came back from something that should have ended you, was a deposit into the anointing, was an addition to the authority to restore others, was heaven building into you the lived understanding of what restoration actually means from the inside rather than just the theory of it from the outside. You are a restorer, and the world desperately needs what you carry. Michael wants to address the weight, because the soul reading these words has been carrying something that is heavier than most people around them understand. Not just the ordinary burdens of human life, though those are present too, but the specific weight of carrying a level of spiritual identity and calling that has not yet been fully named or understood or supported by the people and the community and the framework around you. The weight of knowing things that you do not have a context for. The weight of feeling things that the people around you do not feel in the same way. The weight of carrying an assignment that has not yet been fully revealed. The weight of being wired for depth in environments that operate on the surface. The weight of the intercessory calling that absorbs the pain of others and has to find somewhere to put it. The weight of the boundary breaker, calling that takes you into places and spaces and conversations that extract something from you that does not always get replenished. The weight of the restorer, calling that, sometimes requires you to pour out for others from reserves that are not always full. That weight is real. And it is heavy. And Michael wants to say something about it that is important. You were not designed to carry it alone. The soul that carries these levels of calling was designed to carry them in connection with heaven in a specific way, not just general prayer, a specific, ongoing, active, intimate connection with the divine source that is the only actual replenishment for what gets expended in this kind of spiritual work. The only sustainable model for the intercessor, the boundary breaker, and the restorer is the model of the vine and the branches, staying so connected to the source that what flows out is continuously being replenished by what flows in. The seasons where the weight has been crushing are the seasons where the connection got thin. Not because God withdrew, because the demands on you outpaced the intentionality of your return to the source. Because the pouring out exceeded the pouring in. Because the work of carrying others got prioritized over the essential work of being carried yourself. Michael is calling you back to the source today, not as a rebuke, as a correction, as the guidance of a commander who knows that a warrior who does not maintain their connection to the source of their strength will eventually fight from depletion rather than fullness. And a depleted warrior is a vulnerable warrior. Return to the source. Before the next assignment, before the next season of pouring out, return to the place of being filled, of being held, of being loved not as a chosen soul with a calling, but simply as a beloved child with a father who wants to sit with you in the quiet and restore what was expended and renew what was worn and remind you of who you are before sending you back out. That return is not weakness. It is wisdom. And it is the most important thing you can do right now. Now, Michael wants to speak about what it means that you have returned as who you are in this specific generation at this specific moment in history. Because the timing of your return is not incidental, it is strategic. Heaven does not deploy returning souls randomly. They are sent at the moments when what they carry is most needed, when the specific combination of depth and authority and calling they bring is most essential to what heaven is trying to accomplish on the earth. Look at the world you were sent into. Look at the specific moment of history you inhabit. Look at the needs that are present in this generation that were not present in previous generations in quite the same configuration. The crisis of meaning that is touching every demographic. The collapse of institutional trust that has left millions without a framework for understanding why they are alive. The epidemic of disconnection that has people more technically connected and more spiritually and emotionally alone than at any previous point in human history. The hunger for something real in a world that offers endless simulation. The desperate need for people who have genuinely encountered God to speak about that encounter from a place of authenticity rather than performance. You were sent for this moment. The calling you carry is specifically configured for the needs of this generation. The intercessory depth that feels like too much in ordinary settings is exactly the right depth for people who are drowning in shallowness and are desperately hungry for someone who can go deep with them. The boundary-breaking anointing that takes you into the complicated spaces is exactly what is needed in a generation that has largely decided that the church cannot reach them. The restoration calling that rebuilds what was broken is exactly what is needed in a generation defined by unprecedented levels of brokenness. You did not arrive by accident. You were sent on purpose, to this generation, to this moment, carrying what this moment most needs, and the urgency of that sending is increasing. Because the moment is getting more critical, the needs are becoming more acute. The window for maximum impact is not closing, but it is becoming more defined. The things heaven needs to accomplish through your life are not meant to be delayed indefinitely. They are meant to be activated now, in this season, in this specific window of time that you are living in. Heaven is not asking you to rush. Heaven is asking you to wake up. Michael wants to speak about the shift in your spiritual authority that is happening right now, not something that will happen someday, something that is actively taking place in the spiritual realm around your life in this season, a shift that will become increasingly visible in the physical realm over the coming weeks and months as what is happening in the spirit translates into what is happening in the world you can see. The authority that has been available to you, but that you have been accessing at a fraction of its actual capacity, is being released to you in a new measure. The lid that has been on the operation of your gifts is being removed. The restraint that was necessary during the formation season, because the full release of the authority before the formation was complete would have been premature, is being lifted. What this means practically is that the things you pray are going to carry more weight. The words you speak into situations and into people are going to land with more force. The spiritual discernment you operate in is going to sharpen. The intercession you offer is going to move more quickly from prayer to manifestation. The boundary breaking you are called to is going to happen with more grace and less personal cost. The restoration you carry is going to operate with more speed and more completeness. You are going to start experiencing things that make you aware that something has shifted. Answers to prayer that come faster than they used to. Spiritual insight that arrives with more clarity and more precision. Words of encouragement or truth that you offer to people that have an impact that surprises even you. Doors that open that you did not push on. Connections that form in ways that can only be described as divine arrangement. The evidence of the authority shift will be visible, and you will recognize it. When you see it, do not minimize it. Do not explain it away. Do not attribute it to coincidence or your own cleverness or anything other than what it actually is. Heaven releasing in you what heaven built in you through every season you have been through. The authority of a returning soul stepping into the fullness of the assignment they were sent back for. Receive it, walk in it, and use it for exactly the purposes it was given for. There's a word from Michael for the specific area of your calling that has felt the most stuck, the most frustrated, the most like you can see exactly what you are meant to be doing, and yet something keeps you from the full expression of it. The calling that you know is yours, but that has felt just out of reach. Not because it is not real, not because you are not equipped, but because the enemy has been specifically targeting this area with the most concentrated opposition precisely because it is the area where your impact will be greatest. The enemy is not random in his targeting. He assigns his opposition strategically in proportion to the threat. And the thing about your specific calling in this specific area that the enemy has been opposing is that when it is fully expressed, when you step into it without the holding back and the second guessing and the fear of inadequacy that has kept you from the full version of it, the impact is going to be extraordinary. The reach is going to be extraordinary. The number of lives that are touched and changed and healed and restored through what you carry in this area is something that the enemy absolutely cannot afford to let happen uncontested. So he contested it, with everything available to him: delay, doubt, distraction, discouragement. The voices of people who couldn't see it. The silence of the seasons, where heaven seemed to be confirming nothing. The specific attacks on your confidence in this area, the setbacks that came precisely when you tried to move forward in it. Michael is breaking the opposition over this area of your calling today, with the authority of heaven, with the declaration that what God purposed in you in this specific area is unstoppable, that the opposition that has been effective in causing delay has reached the end of its permitted duration. That the breakthrough in this specific calling area is no longer a future possibility. It is a present reality being released. Step into it, without the usual hesitation, without the careful, cautious, waiting for more confirmation approach that the enemy has trained you into through repeated disappointment. Step in boldly, with the authority of a returning soul who knows who they are in the spirit world. With the confidence of someone who has been told directly by heaven that this is the season, and this is the time, and this is the moment of activation. The door is open. Walk through it. Michael wants to address the people in your life who have not been able to see who you truly are. The ones who have known you in your human ordinary, day-to-day identity without any awareness of the spiritual identity that exists beneath it. The people who have sometimes minimized you, who have related to you as though you were less significant or less capable or less worthy of investment than you actually are, who have missed what was right in front of them because the depth of what you carry is not always visible on the surface and requires a level of spiritual perception to see. Michael wants to release you from any lingering wound around being unseen by those people, not by minimizing the reality that being unseen was painful, not by pretending it did not cost anything to be consistently missed by people whose seeing would have mattered to you, by offering you something that reframes the experience entirely. The people who could not see you were not withholding from you something you needed. Because the seeing you were hungry for was never actually available from human sources. The specific quality of being fully, spiritually, completely seen that you have been longing for is not something that a human being, no matter how perceptive or loving or spiritually developed, can fully provide. The seeing you were made for is heaven's seeing, God's seeing, the gaze of the one who made you and knows you and sees every layer of what you are without missing a single dimension of it. That seeing has been available to you the whole time, not as a consolation for the human seeing you did not get, as the actual thing your soul was always reaching for, even when it seemed to be reaching toward human sources. And in this next season, as you step into the fullness of who you are in the spirit world, as the identity you have been carrying in hiding begins to operate openly, some of the people who missed you before are going to see you for the first time. Not all of them. Some people will never have the eyes to see what you carry. And that is all right. You were not sent to be seen by everyone. You were sent to reach the ones who are ready to receive what you bring. And those people, the ones heaven prepared to receive from you, see you immediately, recognize you immediately, know in the first moment of contact that you are carrying something they need. That is the divine alignment of souls who were meant to find each other. You are about to find yours. Michael wants to give you the final word on who you truly are. The fullest, most comprehensive, most heaven-authorized declaration of the identity you are returning to in this season. The identity that was always yours, but that you are now being called to inhabit fully, completely, without apology and without diminishment. You are an ancient soul in a modern assignment, carrying the depth of encounters with the divine that predate this lifetime. Equipped with wisdom and authority and spiritual sensitivity that was built over more time and more proximity to heaven than your current years can account for. Walking in a world that needs exactly what you carry and has been waiting for your full activation without knowing that is what it was waiting for. You are a carrier of heaven's weight, the intercessor who stands in the gap, the one who feels what the world needs and brings it before the throne, and stays in that place of prayer until heaven moves. The one whose sensitivity is not a weakness, but the very instrument through which divine compassion operates in the earth. You are a breaker of barriers, sent into the spaces where the light has not yet fully penetrated, carrying access to people and places and conversations that other voices